The champagne glass slipped from Simone's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of what used to be her dream kitchen. Through the crack in Derrick's home office door, his voice cut through her heart like broken glass. "That fat woman disgusts me, Candace. I can't even look at her anymore. Thank God I found you, someone who actually takes care of herself." Simone's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Her 200-pound frame felt heavier than ever as she pressed herself against the hallway wall, invisible in her own home. After 12 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, and countless nights of feeling not good enough, she finally heard the truth. "When are you leaving her?" Candace's voice purred through the phone speaker. "Soon. Real soon. Once I figure out how to keep most of my assets. She's contributed nothing to this marriage anyway." The words hit Simone like physical blows. Nothing? She'd worked 2 jobs to put Derrick through law school. She'd managed their household, raised their daughter Tiana mostly alone while Derrick built his practice. She'd swallowed her dreams of becoming a social worker to support his ambitions. 8-year-old Tiana's voice floated down from upstairs. "Mama, can you help me with my homework?" Simone wiped her eyes quickly, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Coming, baby." As she climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, each step felt like walking through quicksand. In Tiana's pink bedroom, her daughter sat cross-legged on her bed, math worksheets spread around her like fallen leaves. "Mama, you look sad. Are you crying?" Tiana's big brown eyes filled with concern that no 8-year-old should carry. Simone sat on the bed's edge, pulling Tiana close. Her daughter's small arms wrapped around her waist, and for a moment, Simone allowed herself to feel the pure, unconditional love that radiated from this beautiful child. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad too, sweetheart. But I'm okay. What problems are we solving tonight?" "Multiplication. Mrs. Jenkins says I'm really good at math, just like you were." Simone's heart clenched. She'd been excellent at mathematics, had dreams of using those skills in social work, creating programs to help families in crisis. Instead, she'd calculated Derrick's billable hours, balanced checkbooks, and slowly multiplied her own self-doubt. They worked through the problems together, Tiana's excited, "I got it" moments providing the only light in Simone's darkening world. After tucking her daughter in with extra kisses, Simone returned to the kitchen to clean up the broken glass. Each shard she picked up reflected her fractured life back at her. 12 years of marriage reduced to Derrick's cruel words. She'd gained weight after each miscarriage, found comfort in food when her husband grew distant, when intimacy became obligation, when conversations became transactions. The front door opened with Derrick's familiar pattern, keys hitting the marble table, briefcase dropping, heavy sigh. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his designer tie, not even noticing the glass fragments in the trash or Simone's red-rimmed eyes. "Dinner?" he asked, already looking at his phone. "There's a plate in the fridge." "I ate already." Client dinner ran long. The lie rolled off his tongue effortlessly. Simone watched him scroll through his phone, probably texting Candace, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not breaking, that had already happened. This was different. This was the quiet moment before a storm when the air goes still. "Derrick." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He didn't look up. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, Simone. I'm exhausted." He walked past her like she was furniture, leaving her standing in the kitchen that had once represented everything she'd wanted: granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a breakfast nook where she'd imagined family meals and laughter. Now it just felt like a beautiful prison. Simone pulled out her phone and dialed the one number that had never failed her. "Grandma Ruth? It's me. Can I come over? I need to bring Tiana." "Chili, you don't even need to ask. You got your key. I'll put the kettle on." Grandma Ruth's small brick house in the West End felt like stepping into a warm embrace. The smell of her famous pound cake mixed with lavender soap and the faint scent of the roses she tended in her backyard garden. Even at midnight, Ruth Davis sat in her kitchen wearing her pink bathrobe, gray hair wrapped in a silk scarf, brown eyes alert and loving. Tiana had fallen asleep in the car and now lay curled on the living room couch, covered with one of Ruth's hand-stitched quilts. "Now tell me what that fool husband of yours done now," Ruth said, pouring chamomile tea into 2 mismatched cups that had served 3 generations of family confessions. Simone's story spilled out between tears, Derrick's words, the affair, the years of feeling invisible in her own life. Ruth listened without interruption, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "Baby girl," Ruth finally said, "you know what your problem is?" Simone shook her head, wiping her nose with the tissue Ruth handed her. You forgot who you are. You let that man convince you that his opinion of you is more important than God's truth about you. You let him make you small. Grandma, I've gained so much weight. I'm not the woman he married. Honey, you carried his children in your body, even the ones heaven called home too soon. You worked yourself to the bone supporting his dreams. You gained weight because you were carrying burdens that weren't meant for one person to bear alone. That man should have been lifting you up, not tearing you down. Ruth reached across the small table and took Simone's hands. But more than that, baby, you need to know something. Something I've been meaning to tell you for years. The seriousness in her grandmother's voice made Simone look up through her tears. Your mama didn't just die in that car accident when you were 3. There's more to the story. More about who you really are. Simone's heart began to race. Her mother, Diane, had been Ruth's daughter, or so she'd always believed. The story had always been simple. Teenage pregnancy, car accident, Simone raised by her loving grandmother who'd never let her feel anything but cherished. What do you mean? Ruth stood slowly and walked to an old secretary desk in the corner. She pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age, and returned to the table. Diane was my foster daughter, not my blood daughter. But I loved her like my own, just like I love you. When she died, I found these papers in her things. She'd been planning to tell you when you got older. Ruth's hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out official documents. Adoption papers, birth certificates, letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Your biological father was a young man named Michael Whitmore. White boy from one of Atlanta's oldest families. Diane was working as a housekeeper in their mansion when they fell in love. She was just 18. Simone stared at the papers, her grandmother's words seeming to come from underwater. Whitmore? As in Whitmore Industries? The people who own half of downtown Atlanta. The very same. When the family found out about the pregnancy, they paid Diane to disappear. Gave her money to leave town, never contact them again. But Diane was stubborn just like you. She stayed in Atlanta, raised you as best she could, worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. Ruth pulled out a photograph. A young black woman with Simone's eyes and smile, standing beside a tall white man with kind features. Michael never knew about you. His family made sure of that. They told him Diane had moved to California and wanted nothing to do with him. He married someone they approved of, but Diane kept this picture. She loved him till the day she died. Simone's world tilted sideways. Everything she thought she knew about herself was shifting like sand beneath her feet. There's more, baby. Michael Whitmore died 5 years ago. Left everything to his mother, Eleanor Whitmore. But according to these papers, if anything ever happened to prove he had a child. Ruth's voice trailed off as she pulled out the final document, a will amendment that made Simone's hands tremble as she read it. Grandma, this says I'm entitled to half of his estate. Half of everything. That's right, honey. Your mama kept all the proof. DNA evidence, letters, everything. She was planning to contact them when you turned 21, but the accident happened first. I kept these papers all these years, waiting for the right time to tell you. Simone stared at the documents spread across her grandmother's kitchen table. Birth certificates. DNA test results. Bank records showing payments made to her mother. A private investigator's report tracking the Whitmore family history. Why now, Grandma? Why are you telling me this now? Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Because you need to know who you really are, Chili. You're not just Derek Davis's wife who gained some weight. You're not just that mean man's opinion of you. You're Simone Whitmore Davis, daughter of 2 people who loved each other despite the whole world trying to keep them apart. You're the granddaughter of one of the most powerful women in Georgia. You carry the blood of fighters, baby girl. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of Ruth's old cuckoo clock. Tiana stirred on the couch, mumbling in her sleep, and Simone felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders alongside this shocking revelation. What do I do with this information? That's up to you, honey. But I'll tell you one thing, you got legal grounds to claim what's rightfully yours. And more than that, you got grounds to show Derek Davis and his little girlfriend that they just messed with the wrong woman. The law office of Patricia Cole and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Atlanta high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city sprawling toward the horizon. Patricia Cole herself was a force of nature, 45 years old, natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blue suit that spoke of success earned through brilliance and determination. Mrs. Davis, Patricia said, shaking Simone's hand with a firm grip. Your grandmother's call was quite intriguing. Please have a seat. Simone settled into the leather chair across from Patricia's massive mahogany desk, the manila envelope containing her mother's secrets clutched in her lap. The office walls displayed Patricia's credentials: Harvard Law, numerous awards, photos with prominent civil rights leaders and politicians. "I have to admit I'm nervous," Simone began. "This all feels surreal." "That's understandable. Let's start with what you know and then we'll look at what you've brought me." For the next 2 hours, Simone laid out the entire story while Patricia examined each document with the intensity of a surgeon. The lawyer made notes, asked pointed questions, and occasionally raised her eyebrows at particularly damning pieces of evidence. "This is remarkable," Patricia finally said. "Your mother was incredibly thorough. DNA evidence from 1990, documented payments from the Whitmore family, even recorded conversations she had with a private investigator. She built an airtight case. So it's real? You're really the biological granddaughter of Eleanor Whitmore, one of the wealthiest women in the South. And according to Michael Whitmore's will, which I've just pulled up in the public records, you're entitled to half of his estate." Patricia's computer screen showed numbers that made Simone's head spin. Property values, stock portfolios, trust fund balances, all totaling well into the hundreds of millions. "But there's something else we need to discuss," Patricia continued, her expression growing serious. "Claiming this inheritance will mean going public with your identity. The Whitmore family isn't going to just hand over hundreds of millions without a fight, even with this evidence. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny?" Simone thought about Derrick's words echoing in her head, about the way he looked right through her, about Tiana growing up thinking her mother was worthless. "Yes, I'm prepared." "Good. Because I'm going to be honest with you, this case could take months, maybe years. But I believe we have an excellent chance of success. However, I want you to understand that money won't solve everything. You'll still need to do the internal work of rebuilding your self-worth." Patricia reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "Dr. Amara Thompson is a therapist who specializes in helping women rebuild their lives after major transitions. I'd strongly recommend you start seeing her immediately. I can't afford therapy right now. Derrick controls all our accounts. Mrs. Davis, let me be clear about something. Based on these documents, you're about to become one of the wealthiest women in Georgia. I'm willing to take this case on contingency, and Dr. Thompson has agreed to see you pro bono until your finances are settled. You don't have to stay trapped in your current situation for one more day." The weight of Patricia's words settled over Simone like a blanket. For the first time in years she felt like she could breathe fully. "What's our first step?" "We're going to request a meeting with Eleanor Whitmore and her legal team. We'll present the evidence and give them a chance to handle this quietly. If they refuse, we go public and file suit. Either way, your life is about to change dramatically." "And my husband? What about the divorce proceedings?" Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Oh, Derrick Davis is in for quite a surprise. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly. But inheritance received during marriage remains separate property. He'll get half of what you both built together, but your Whitmore inheritance? That's yours alone." "He's going to be furious." "Let him be furious. He made his choice when he decided to humiliate and disrespect you. Now you get to make yours." As Simone left the law office, the afternoon sun felt warmer on her face. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derrick. "Working late again. Don't wait up." For the first time in years, she didn't feel the familiar stab of rejection. Instead, she felt something that had been dormant so long she'd almost forgotten what it was called: power. She drove to Grandma Ruth's house to pick up Tiana, who was helping Ruth tend her rose garden. Watching her daughter's face light up as she spotted a butterfly landing on a pink bloom, Simone made a silent promise. Never again would Tiana see her mother accept less than she deserved. Never again would this little girl grow up thinking a man's opinion determined a woman's worth. Everything was about to change, and for the first time in years, Simone wasn't afraid of the unknown. She was excited by it. Dr. Amara Thompson's office felt like a sanctuary. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture and warm earth tones, and the gentle sound of a small fountain created an atmosphere of peace that Simone had nearly forgotten existed. Dr. Thompson herself radiated calm competence. A black woman in her late 30s with natural hair, kind eyes, and a presence that immediately put Simone at ease. "Tell me about the last time you felt truly confident," Dr. Thompson said, settling into her chair with a notepad and gentle smile. Simone thought for a long moment, surprised by how far back she had to reach. "College, I think. I was studying social work, making good grades, had plans to work with families in crisis. I felt like I could change the world." "What happened to that version of yourself?" "I met Derrick. He was in law school, so focused, so ambitious. When he said he needed my support to succeed, it felt romantic, like we were building something together. But somewhere along the way, supporting him meant disappearing myself. Dr. Thompson nodded knowingly. It's common for women to lose themselves in the process of supporting others, especially when that support isn't reciprocated. Tell me about your relationship with food. The question hit like a gentle probe into an infected wound. Simone shifted uncomfortably. Food became my friend. When Derrick worked late, when the pregnancies ended, when he stopped seeing me, food was there. It never judged me, never criticized me, never left me feeling empty. But it also became a prison. Yes. The more weight I gained, the more Derrick pulled away. The more he pulled away, the more I ate. It became this awful cycle where I was proving his rejection right. Dr. Thompson leaned forward slightly. Simone, I want you to try something. Look in that mirror on the wall and tell me what you see. Simone reluctantly turned toward the full-length mirror positioned near the office window. Her reflection stared back, a 34-year-old black woman in ill-fitting clothes, shoulders slumped, eyes filled with pain she'd carried for years. I see someone who's tired. Someone who's been hiding. What else? Simone studied her reflection more carefully. I see my mother's eyes. My grandmother's strong jawline. She paused, something shifting in her perception. I see someone who's survived a lot. Good. What else do you notice? My smile. When I actually smile, it lights up my whole face. I'd forgotten that. Beauty isn't a size, Simone. It's energy, confidence, the light that comes from knowing your own worth. Right now, that light is dim because you've been living someone else's definition of who you should be. Over the next hour, Dr. Thompson guided Simone through exercises in self-compassion, helping her understand how years of emotional neglect had manifested in her relationship with food and her own body. The inheritance you've discovered is more than money, Dr. Thompson explained. It's permission to reclaim who you've always been underneath the pain. But the real work isn't about claiming your grandmother's fortune. It's about claiming yourself. How do I start? Small steps. Today, I want you to do one thing that the old, confident Simone would have done. Something that brings you joy without anyone else's approval. After the session, Simone sat in her car in the parking lot, thinking about Dr. Thompson's challenge. What would the confident version of herself do? The answer came suddenly: she'd go shopping. Not for clothes that hid her body or made excuses for it, but for something that made her feel beautiful exactly as she was. At Nordstrom, Simone felt overwhelmed by the rows of clothing, the skinny mannequins, the implied judgment of sales associates. She almost left twice. But then she remembered Patricia Cole's powerful presence, Dr. Thompson's gentle strength, Grandma Ruth's unwavering love. Can I help you find something? A young black sales associate named Jasmine approached with a genuine smile. I need to feel beautiful again, Simone said, surprising herself with her honesty. Jasmine's eyes filled with understanding. Honey, let me tell you something, beautiful isn't a size. It's an attitude. Let's find you something that celebrates who you are right now. For the next 2 hours, Jasmine helped Simone try on clothes in rich jewel tones that complemented her skin, fabrics that draped rather than clung, styles that accentuated her best features rather than hiding her body. In the dressing room mirror, wearing a deep purple wrap dress and heels, Simone saw a glimpse of the woman she used to be, and could be again. That dress was made for you, Jasmine said admiringly. You're glowing. Simone bought the dress, along with matching accessories and a tube of lipstick in a shade called Unstoppable. As she walked through the mall carrying her purchases, she noticed something different in how people looked at her. Not the clothes, but her posture, her energy, the confidence beginning to radiate from within. Her phone buzzed. Derrick again. Client dinner tonight. Feed Tiana. Instead of the usual pang of loneliness, Simone felt relief. She had plans too now. Important plans that had nothing to do with Derrick Davis and everything to do with reclaiming her life. She was going to call Eleanor Whitmore. Eleanor Whitmore's Buckhead mansion sat on 5 manicured acres behind iron gates that had protected old Atlanta money for 3 generations. The house itself was a masterpiece of Southern architecture. White columns, wraparound porches, and gardens that had been featured in Southern Living magazine. Inside her private study, Eleanor sat behind an antique desk, reviewing quarterly reports from her various business holdings. At 68, she remained a formidable presence. Silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, intelligent blue eyes, and the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of wielding power. Her private secretary, James, knocked softly before entering. Mrs. Whitmore, there's a call on line 1. A lawyer named Patricia Cole. She says it's urgent and concerns your late son Michael. Eleanor's hand paused over her fountain pen. Michael had been gone 5 years now, and she still felt the ache of his loss every day. Her only child, taken by cancer at 52, leaving behind no children and a fortune that would eventually pass to distant cousins. Put her through. Patricia's voice was professional but firm. Mrs. Whitmore, I represent a young woman named Simone Davis, née Simone Diane Washington. I believe she's your granddaughter. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She gripped the phone tighter, her mind racing back 34 years to the scandal that had nearly destroyed her family's reputation. That's impossible. My son never had children. With respect, ma'am, I believe he did. I'm holding DNA evidence, birth certificates, and documentation of payments your family made to a young woman named Diane Washington in 1990. We have proof that Michael Whitmore is Simone's biological father. Eleanor's hand trembled as she set down her pen. The memory came flooding back. Michael, 22 and fresh out of college, announcing he was in love with the most beautiful woman in the world. When they discovered the woman was black, a teenage housekeeper from the wrong side of town, Eleanor's late husband Charles had handled the situation with the cold efficiency that had built their empire. We paid that girl to disappear. She signed papers. She took your money, yes, but she never gave up her child. Simone was raised here in Atlanta by her grandmother, Ruth Davis. She's now 34 years old, married, with an 8-year-old daughter of her own. Eleanor closed her eyes, seeing Michael's face in her mind. His gentleness, his idealism, the way he'd grieved for months after Diane disappeared. They'd told him she'd taken the money and moved to California, wanted nothing more to do with him. He'd believed it because he'd trusted his parents to tell him the truth. What does this woman want? She wants to meet you. She wants you to know that you have family you've never met. And yes, she's aware of the inheritance implications of her parentage. Eleanor walked to the window overlooking her gardens, where Michael used to play as a child. A granddaughter. Not just any granddaughter, but the child of the only woman Michael had ever truly loved. I'll need to verify everything, of course. Of course. We can arrange for independent DNA testing, though I believe the evidence we have is conclusive. Mrs. Whitmore, Simone isn't looking to destroy your family or create scandal. She's looking to understand her heritage and claim her rightful place in the family. Her rightful place. Eleanor repeated the words slowly. According to Michael's will, any biological child would inherit half his estate. Half of everything she'd planned to leave to charity or distant relatives. But more than the money, this meant Michael's bloodline would continue. His grandchild, Eleanor's great-granddaughter, would carry forward the family legacy. When can we meet? 3 days later, Eleanor sat in Patricia Cole's conference room, her own team of lawyers flanking her as she reviewed the mountain of evidence. DNA test results confirming Michael's paternity. Birth certificates. Hospital records. Even photographs of Michael and Diane together, young and in love, defying a world that said they couldn't be. I remember her, Eleanor said quietly, studying a photo of Diane. She was working in our house the summer before Michael's senior year. Beautiful girl. Intelligent. Michael talked about her constantly, but we thought it was just a summer infatuation. According to these documents, they continued seeing each other secretly for months after summer ended, Patricia said. Diane became pregnant in December 1989. Your son never knew. Eleanor's lawyer, Hamilton Forbes, leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, the financial implications are significant. If we acknowledge paternity, Miss Davis becomes entitled to half of Michael's estate under the will. I understand the implications, Hamilton. Eleanor's voice was sharp. She'd built her own fortune, had survived losing her husband and her son. Money, while important, wasn't everything. I want to meet her, Eleanor announced. Arrange a meeting. Private and formal. I want to see my granddaughter. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at Eleanor's home. As the limousine pulled through the gates, Simone felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Beside her, Grandma Ruth squeezed her hand. Remember who you are, baby. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Tiana sat quietly between them, wearing her best dress and trying to understand why this meeting was so important. Mama, is this lady really my great-grandmama? We're about to find out, sweetheart. Eleanor waited in her formal living room, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When Simone walked in, Eleanor's breath caught. The resemblance to Michael was unmistakable, the same warm brown eyes, the same gentle smile, the same quiet dignity that had drawn her son to Diane all those years ago. My God, Eleanor whispered, rising from her chair. You look just like him. Simone stopped in the doorway, taking in this woman who might be her grandmother, elegant, powerful, but with eyes filled with tears and unmistakable longing. "Mrs. Whitmore," Simone said softly. "Thank you for seeing us." "Eleanor. Please call me Eleanor." She looked at Tiana, who was staring wide-eyed at the mansion's grandeur. "And this beautiful child must be my great-granddaughter." The ice broke when Tiana, with 8-year-old boldness, walked up to Eleanor and said, "You have a really nice house. Do you live here all by yourself?" Eleanor laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. "Yes, sweetheart, I do. It gets quite lonely sometimes." "That's sad. Nobody should live alone. Maybe you could come visit us sometimes." Eleanor looked at Simone, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that very much." Over the next 3 hours, Eleanor learned about the family she'd never known existed. Ruth's warmth and wisdom, Tiana's bright personality, and Simone's strength in surviving a marriage that had tried to break her spirit. "I owe you an apology," Eleanor said to Simone as afternoon turned to evening. "If I had known about you, if I had handled things differently with your parents." "You can't change the past," Simone replied. "But we can decide what happens next." Eleanor nodded, understanding passing between the two women. Yes, we can." That evening, as Simone, Ruth, and Tiana headed home in their modest sedan, Eleanor sat alone in her mansion and made several phone calls. To her lawyers, to her financial advisors, and finally to her oldest friend. "Margaret, it's Eleanor. You'll never believe what's happened. I have a granddaughter." The wheels of change were already turning. Derrick Davis sat in his corner office at the law firm, feet propped on his desk, on the phone with Candace planning their weekend getaway to Charleston. Through his window, downtown Atlanta gleamed in the morning sun, a view of success he'd worked 12 years to achieve. "Book us the penthouse suite at the Ocean House," he told Candace, not bothering to lower his voice even though his office door was open. "And make dinner reservations at that seafood place you mentioned." "What about Simone? Won't she wonder where you are?" Derrick laughed coldly. "Simone hasn't asked me where I'm going in months. She's too busy feeling sorry for herself to care what I do." His secretary, Mrs. Patterson, appeared in his doorway looking unusually flustered. "Mr. Davis? There are some people here to see you. They say it's urgent." "I'm busy. Tell them to make an appointment." "Sir, one of them says she's your wife's lawyer." Derrick's feet hit the floor. Patricia Cole walked into his office like she owned it, followed by a woman Derrick didn't recognize carrying an official-looking briefcase. "Mr. Davis, I'm Patricia Cole, representing your wife in your upcoming divorce proceedings. This is Sandra Williams from the Domestic Relations Court." "Divorce proceedings? What are you talking about? We haven't discussed divorce." Patricia smiled the way a shark smiles at a bleeding fish. "Oh, but you have. You discussed it quite extensively with Ms. Candace Murphy during a phone conversation 3 nights ago. The one where you called my client, that fat woman, who disgusts you." Derrick's mouth went dry. "How do you know about your conversation?" "Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording, Mr. Davis. Your wife was in her own home when she overheard your charming commentary about her appearance and your extramarital activities." Sandra Williams stepped forward. "Mr. Davis, I'm serving you with divorce papers and a restraining order. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings from the marital home. All joint accounts are frozen pending division of assets." Derrick stared at the papers, his mind reeling. "This is ridiculous. Simone doesn't have the backbone for this. And she certainly doesn't have the money to hire lawyers like you." Patricia's smile widened. "Oh, Mr. Davis, you have no idea what your wife is capable of when she stops accepting your definition of her worth. As for the legal fees, let's just say Mrs. Davis's financial situation has recently improved dramatically." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll find out soon enough. I do have one question though. When you told Ms. Murphy that your wife had contributed nothing to this marriage, did you forget that she worked 2 jobs to put you through law school? That she managed your household and raised your daughter while you built your practice? That she sacrificed her own career dreams to support yours?" Derrick's face flushed red. "She made those choices. Actually, she made those sacrifices. There's a difference. Choices imply options. Sacrifices imply loss. And in family court, judges tend to remember which spouse supported the other's career development." Sandra handed Derrick additional papers. "You're also being served with a custody petition. Mrs. Davis is seeking primary custody of Tiana, with supervised visitation for you." "Supervised? That's insane. I'm her father." "A father who's been absent from her life while conducting an affair," Patricia said smoothly. A father whose own child asked her mother why daddy doesn't love them anymore. 8-year-olds notice more than you think, Mr. Davis. Derrick looked around his office. The diplomas, the awards, the view he'd worked so hard to earn, and felt his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. How much does she want? Patricia gathered her papers. Mrs. Davis isn't interested in taking you for everything you're worth, Mr. Davis. Unlike you, she has compassion. She simply wants what's fair, plus child support for Tiana, and an end to a marriage that should have ended years ago. And if I fight this? Then we'll go to trial, and every detail of your affair, your financial misconduct, and your emotional abandonment of your family will become public record. Your law firm will love reading about their partner's character in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. After the women left, Derrick sat alone in his office, the divorce papers scattered across his desk like shrapnel from an explosion. His phone buzzed with a text from Candace. Can't wait for Charleston. 2 hearts. For the first time in months, Derrick didn't respond. Instead, he found himself remembering the woman he'd married 12 years ago. Bright, supportive, believing in his dreams when he barely believed in them himself. But it was too late for regrets now. The door to his office closed with a sound like a coffin lid. 6 weeks after the divorce papers were served, Simone stood in front of the full-length mirror in her new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom in Virginia Highland that she and Tiana had picked out together. The reflection staring back at her was almost unrecognizable from the broken woman who'd overheard Derrick's cruel words. She'd lost 30 pounds through therapy, regular meals instead of emotional eating, and daily walks with Tiana through Piedmont Park. But more than the weight loss, her entire presence had changed. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes bright, and she wore clothes that celebrated her body rather than hiding it. Mama, you look like a princess. Tiana called from the bedroom doorway, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Simone smiled at her daughter's reflection. Thank you, baby. Are you ready for tonight? Tonight was the charity gala at the High Museum, Eleanor's annual fundraiser for children's education. It would be Simone's first public appearance as a Whitmore, and she wanted to make a statement. The royal blue gown Eleanor had helped her select fit perfectly, emphasizing her curves rather than hiding them. Her hair, freshly styled in soft curls, framed her face beautifully. Diamond earrings, a gift from Eleanor, caught the light as she moved. The car's here, Tiana announced, peering out the window. Simone's heart skipped. Not a car, a limousine. Eleanor had insisted, saying, if you're going to introduce yourself to Atlanta society, we're going to do it properly. The white stretch limousine gleamed in the evening light, drawing curious stares from neighbors. The uniformed driver held the door as Simone and Tiana settled into the plush interior, complete with champagne and sparkling cider for Tiana. This is the most beautiful car ever, Tiana breathed, pressing her face to the tinted window. As they glided through Atlanta traffic, Simone's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Thompson. Remember, you belong everywhere you choose to be. Enjoy tonight. The High Museum was ablaze with lights, red carpet stretched beneath a canopy where photographers captured arrivals. Simone felt a flutter of nerves as their limousine joined the line of luxury vehicles. Second thoughts. Eleanor's voice came from the car's speakerphone. No, Simone said, surprising herself with how firm she sounded. I'm ready. When their limousine pulled up to the red carpet, the photographers' cameras were focused on a celebrity couple ahead of them. Then Simone stepped out, followed by Tiana in her elegant little black dress, and the energy shifted. Who is that? Someone whispered. Stunning, another voice murmured. Eleanor appeared immediately, elegant in silver silk, her face glowing with pride as she embraced Simone and Tiana. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor announced to the gathering crowd of reporters, I'd like you to meet my granddaughter, Simone Whitmore Davis, and my great-granddaughter, Tiana. The cameras exploded with flashes. Questions flew from reporters who'd covered Atlanta society for decades and had never heard of any Whitmore grandchildren. Inside the museum, the city's elite mingled beneath soaring ceilings and priceless artwork. Simone found herself introduced to mayors, business leaders, philanthropists, people who moved in circles she'd never imagined accessing. Your grandmother speaks of you constantly, said Margaret Hastings, one of Eleanor's oldest friends. She's absolutely radiant since finding you. Across the room, Simone spotted a familiar figure near the bar. Derrick stood with Candace, both dressed expensively but looking somehow diminished among the true power players in the room. Derrick's eyes found Simone's across the crowded space, and his champagne glass nearly slipped from his hand. The woman standing beside Eleanor Whitmore, laughing and commanding attention from Atlanta's most influential people, bore little resemblance to the broken wife he'd left behind. This woman radiated confidence, beauty, and unmistakable wealth. The diamonds at her throat and ears weren't costume jewelry, they were real and they were magnificent. "Isn't that your ex-wife?" Candace hissed, tugging at Derrick's arm. Derrick couldn't speak. He watched Simone move through the crowd with Eleanor, seeing how naturally she fit into this world of power and privilege, how Tiana charmed everyone she met with her bright personality and perfect manners. Derrick Davis, Patricia Cole appeared beside him with a predatory smile. "How lovely to see you here. Though I'm surprised you could afford tickets to this event. What is she doing here?" Derrick managed to ask. "Oh, you haven't heard?" Patricia's voice carried just far enough for nearby guests to overhear. "Simone is Eleanor Whitmore's newly discovered granddaughter. Quite the inheritance, I'm told. Hundreds of millions. Maybe you should have treated her better when you had the chance." Derrick felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Around him he could hear whispers starting, people putting pieces together. His wife, his fat, disgusting, worthless wife, was one of the wealthiest women in Georgia. "Excuse me," he mumbled, pulling Candace toward the exit. But Candace was staring at Simone with undisguised envy and calculation. "Derrick, do you think, could we maybe?" "No." Derrick's voice was sharp. "Whatever you're thinking, no. It's too late." Meanwhile, Simone was being introduced to Dr. James Crawford, director of the city's largest children's hospital. "Your grandmother mentioned you studied social work," Dr. Crawford said. "We're actually looking for someone to head up our new family crisis intervention program. Someone who understands what families in crisis truly need." Simone felt her pulse quicken. Her old dreams, the ones she'd buried to support Derrick's ambitions, suddenly felt within reach again. "I'd love to hear more about that," she said. Eleanor watched from across the room as Simone spoke passionately with Dr. Crawford about child welfare and family support systems. This was the granddaughter she'd dreamed of, intelligent, compassionate, strong enough to carry forward the family legacy of philanthropy and service. "She's remarkable," Margaret said, joining Eleanor. "You must be so proud." "I am. She's everything Michael would have wanted his daughter to be." As the evening wound down, Simone and Tiana said their goodbyes and settled back into the limousine. Tiana had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, clutching a small stuffed elephant gifted by one of Eleanor's friends. "How do you feel?" Eleanor asked, joining them for the ride home. "Like myself again," Simone said softly. "Like the person I was always supposed to be before I forgot who that was." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "This is just the beginning, dear. Tomorrow we'll announce your position on the Whitmore Foundation board. Next week, Dr. Crawford will officially offer you that hospital position. And next month." "Next month?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Next month, we're hosting a celebration at the family estate. A proper introduction to society. Every important family in Atlanta will be there. Including, I suspect, some people who might be very surprised to see how well you're doing." The Whitmore family estate in Marietta sat on 200 acres of rolling hills, gardens, and pristine lakes. Built in 1923, the mansion had hosted governors, senators, and captains of industry for nearly a century. Now, on a perfect September evening, it would witness one of Atlanta's most talked-about social events in decades. Simone stood in the estate's master suite, putting the finishing touches on her appearance for the celebration in her honor. The deep emerald gown Eleanor had commissioned from a local designer fit her like it was painted on, celebrating every curve of her now healthy figure. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon with tendrils framing her face. The Whitmore family emeralds, worn by 3 generations of women, caught the light as she moved. "Mama, you look like a queen." Tiana burst through the door in a flutter of pink tulle and excitement. "Thank you, Princess. Are you ready to meet all our new friends?" Over the past 2 months, Simone's life had transformed beyond recognition. She'd accepted the position as Director of Family Crisis Intervention at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, a role that allowed her to use her social work education to help families navigate their darkest moments. The Whitmore Foundation had provided initial funding for the program, making Simone both employee and benefactor. More importantly, she continued her therapy with Dr. Thompson, learning to love herself not despite her past struggles, but because of the strength they'd revealed. She'd lost another 20 pounds, not through deprivation but through joy. Cooking healthy meals with Tiana, taking dance classes, rediscovering the simple pleasure of moving her body. "Mrs. Whitmore Davis?" Eleanor's assistant appeared in the doorway. "Your guests are beginning to arrive." From the master bedroom's balcony, Simone could see luxury cars winding up the estate's long driveway. Beneath the massive white tents on the south lawn, round tables dressed in crisp linens awaited 500 of Atlanta's most influential citizens. A full orchestra tuned their instruments while caterers put finishing touches on displays that rivaled royal banquets. "Nervous?" Eleanor asked, joining Simone and Tiana on the balcony. At 68, Eleanor looked radiant in sapphire blue silk, her silver hair styled in an elegant updo. "Excited," Simone replied, surprised to realize it was true. 3 months ago I was hiding in my kitchen, believing I was worthless. Tonight, I'm celebrating becoming exactly who I was always meant to be. Eleanor smiled with deep satisfaction. "Your mother would be so proud." "Both my mothers would be," Simone said, thinking of Diane and of Ruth, who was downstairs in the formal dining room, holding court with Eleanor's oldest friends like she'd been born to society life. The celebration officially began at sunset, with Eleanor taking the microphone as guests gathered on the south lawn. "Friends, thank you for joining us tonight for a very special celebration. 6 months ago I thought the Whitmore family line would end with me. Tonight, I'm honored to officially introduce you to my granddaughter, Simone Whitmore Davis, and her daughter Tiana, the 5th generation of our family to call Georgia home." Applause rippled through the crowd as Simone stepped forward, Tiana's small hand in hers. Under the fairy lights strung between ancient oak trees, she looked like royalty, confident, radiant, and utterly comfortable in her own skin. "Thank you all for welcoming Tiana and me into this wonderful community," Simone began, her voice carrying clearly across the lawn. 3 months ago, I was a woman who had forgotten her own worth, who had allowed others to define her value. Tonight, I stand before you not just as Eleanor Whitmore's granddaughter, but as a woman who has remembered that our worth comes from within, from our compassion, our strength, and our commitment to lifting others up. Near the back of the crowd, partly hidden behind a catering tent, Derrick Davis stood with Candace. They hadn't been invited, but Candace had insisted on coming, convinced she could somehow work her way back into Derrick's life now that his financial situation looked drastically different. Derrick stared at his ex-wife, struggling to reconcile this elegant, confident woman with the broken person he'd left behind. Simone commanded attention effortlessly, her presence magnetic in a way that had nothing to do with her grandmother's money and everything to do with the light radiating from within. "The Whitmore family has always believed in service to others," Simone continued. "In that spirit, I'm announcing tonight that the Whitmore Foundation will be funding a new initiative, the Second Chances Family Center. This facility will provide counseling, job training, and support services for women and families in crisis, because everyone deserves the chance to rebuild their lives with dignity and hope." The applause was thunderous. Eleanor wiped away tears as she watched her granddaughter own the moment completely. "Now," Simone said with a smile that could have powered the city, "let's celebrate. There's incredible food, amazing music, and wonderful company. Thank you for making this the most magical night of my life." As the orchestra struck up the first dance, Derrick found himself pushed forward by Candace. "Go talk to her," Candace hissed. "Maybe it's not too late. Maybe she'll take you back now that you know what she's worth." Derrick stared at Candace in disgust. The woman he'd thought was so much better than his wife was revealed to be exactly what she'd always been: shallow, grasping, interested only in what she could get from others. "You don't understand," Derrick said quietly. "She was always worth this much. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it." But Derrick's moment of clarity came too late. Security guards were already escorting them off the property, having spotted the uninvited guests. As Derrick was led away, he caught one final glimpse of Simone dancing with Tiana under the stars, both of them laughing with pure joy. That image would haunt him forever, not because of the wealth he'd lost access to, but because of the incredible woman he'd thrown away through his own cruelty and blindness. 1 year after that magical evening at the Whitmore estate, Simone sat in her office at the newly constructed Second Chances Family Center, reviewing applications for their expanded programs. Through her office window, she could see families arriving for various services: job training, counseling, childcare, and the kind of comprehensive support she'd wished had existed during her own darkest moments. "Mrs. Davis?" Her assistant, Maria, knocked on the open door. "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here." Simone looked up from her paperwork, then froze. Standing in her doorway was a young black woman, maybe 22 years old, holding the hand of a little boy about 4. The woman's eyes were red from crying, and she had that particular look of desperation that Simone recognized from her own mirror not so long ago. "Please come in," Simone said gently, standing to greet them. I'm Simone Davis. This handsome young man must be your son. I'm Kendra, and this is Marcus Jr., the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. Over the next hour, Kendra's story unfolded, a story that felt familiar in its pain. Married at 18 to her high school boyfriend, she dropped out of college to support his dreams of becoming a mechanic. Now, for years later, Marcus was drinking heavily, staying out all night, and calling her worthless for gaining weight after their son's birth. He says I'm disgusting now, Kendra whispered, unconsciously echoing words that had once shattered Simone's world. That no other man would want me. That I should be grateful he stays. Simone reached across her desk and took Kendra's trembling hands. Look at me, sweetheart. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Kendra shook her head. I see a young woman who worked 2 jobs to put her husband through technical school. I see a mother who's raising a beautiful, intelligent little boy. I see someone who's strong enough to walk into a stranger's office and ask for help when she needs it. That takes incredible courage. But I've gained so much weight. I'm not pretty anymore. Simone stood and walked to the full-length mirror she'd installed in her office, not for vanity, but as a tool for helping clients see themselves clearly. Come here. Both of you. Kendra hesitantly joined Simone at the mirror, Marcus Jr. clinging to his mother's leg. What do you see? Simone asked. I see someone who's fat and ugly and worthless. No, honey. You see someone who's been carrying burdens that aren't hers to carry alone. You see a woman who's forgotten that her worth isn't determined by a man's opinion of her body. You see someone who needs to remember who she was before she started believing other people's lies about her value. Simone pulled out her phone and showed Kendra a photo from 2 years ago. Simone at her heaviest, eyes dead with pain, posture defeated. This was me 24 months ago. I thought I was worthless too. I thought my husband's cruel words were the truth about who I was. Kendra stared at the photo, then at Simone's current reflection. Confident, radiant, successful. What changed? Kendra asked. I remembered that I was never the problem. The problem was accepting treatment that no human being deserves. The problem was believing that love meant making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. But where do I start? I don't have money for lawyers or therapy or... You start right here, Simone said firmly. The Second Chances Family Center provides everything you need. Legal consultation, counseling, job training, childcare for Marcus Jr., and temporary housing if you need to leave your current situation. Everything is free, funded by people who believe every woman deserves a second chance at happiness. Over the following months, Simone watched Kendra transform in ways that reminded her of her own journey. Legal aid helped Kendra file for divorce and establish child support. Therapy helped her rebuild her self-esteem. Job training gave her skills as a medical assistant. Most importantly, she learned to see herself through loving eyes instead of through the lens of abuse. I got the job, Kendra announced one afternoon, bursting into Simone's office with Marcus Jr. in tow. Head medical assistant at the pediatric clinic. They said they were impressed by my training and my compassion for families in crisis. Simone felt tears of pride pricking her eyes. I'm so proud of you. But you know what I'm most proud of? What? That you never gave up on yourself even when it felt impossible to keep going. Later that evening, Simone sat on the back porch of her new home, a beautiful colonial in Decatur that she'd purchased for herself and Tiana. Eleanor visited regularly, and the guest room was always ready for Grandma Ruth, who'd become Eleanor's closest friend and bridge partner. Tiana, now 9 years old, was in the backyard teaching Eleanor's golden retriever, Duchess, new tricks. Eleanor sat beside Simone on the porch swing, both women watching the child they both loved more than life itself. You know what makes me happiest about all this? Eleanor said, sipping her sweet tea. What's that? It's not the money or the social position or even finding family I thought was lost forever. It's watching you become the woman you were always meant to be. Money can't buy that kind of transformation. Simone nodded, thinking about Kendra and the dozens of other women who'd walked through the center's doors in the past year. The best part is being able to help others find their way back to themselves too. Your mother, both of your mothers, would be so proud. As if summoned by the mention of family, Ruth appeared on the porch carrying a pitcher of fresh sweet tea and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that meant she'd been meddling in someone's love life. Y'all talking about proud mothers? Ruth settled into her favorite wicker chair. Speaking of which, that nice Dr. Thompson asked about you again today, Simone. Grandma Ruth, Simone warned, but she was smiling. What? I'm just saying that man has been finding excuses to visit the center an awful lot lately. And he looks at you like you hung the moon. Eleanor raised an eyebrow with interest. Dr. Thompson? Amara's colleague at the hospital, Simone explained. Dr. David Thompson. He's been helping with our medical screening program for families. And he's single, successful, and thinks our Simone is the most beautiful woman in Atlanta, Ruth added with satisfaction. I'm not ready for romance, Simone protested. I'm still figuring out who I am as an independent woman. Honey, Eleanor said gently, there's a difference between depending on a man to define your worth and choosing to share your life with someone who celebrates the worth you already know you have. As the sun set over their perfect evening, Simone reflected on how much had changed in 18 months. She'd gone from hiding in her kitchen believing she was worthless, to running a thriving nonprofit, raising a confident daughter, and building a life filled with purpose and joy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. David Thompson. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow about the new pediatric social work program. Tiana's science project was the hit of the hospital board meeting. Simone smiled, feeling that familiar flutter of possibility. Maybe Ruth and Eleanor were right. Maybe there was room in her full, rich life for someone who saw her clearly and loved what he saw. Maybe, she said quietly, just maybe. 2 years after the night that changed everything, the grand ballroom of the Atlanta Ritz-Carlton gleamed with crystal and candlelight. The city's most influential citizens had gathered for the annual Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Gala, where Simone would be honored as Philanthropist of the Year for her work with the Second Chances Family Center. In the hotel's bridal suite, Simone stood before a full-length mirror, putting the finishing touches on her appearance. The champagne-colored gown hugged her curves perfectly. She'd maintained her healthy weight not through deprivation but through joy, self-love, and the confidence that radiated from within. You look absolutely stunning, Dr. David Thompson said from the doorway, resplendent in his black tuxedo. Over the past year, their professional collaboration had blossomed into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that celebrated each other's strength rather than trying to diminish it. Thank you, Simone said, turning to face the man who'd helped her believe in love again. Are you ready for tonight? David's eyes sparkled with mischief. I'd been ready for months. Before Simone could ask what he meant, Tiana burst through the door in a flutter of silver tulle, now 11 years old and growing into the confident, compassionate young woman her mother had raised her to be. Mama. Grandma Eleanor says it's time to go downstairs. Eleanor appeared behind Tiana, elegant in navy blue silk, her face glowing with pride. At 70, she'd found new purpose in her granddaughter's mission and had become one of Atlanta's most effective advocates for children and families in crisis. The car is waiting, Eleanor announced. And Ruth is already downstairs charming every board member in sight. Indeed, Grandma Ruth had become something of a celebrity in Atlanta society circles, her warmth and wisdom making her a sought-after dinner party guest and bridge partner. As they made their way to the ballroom, Simone reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The Second Chances Family Center now served over 500 families annually, with a waiting list that stretched for months. They'd opened satellite locations in 3 other cities, funded by the Whitmore Foundation and donations from supporters who believed in second chances. More importantly, Simone had helped dozens of women like Kendra remember their own worth. Women who'd been told they were worthless had gone on to become nurses, teachers, entrepreneurs, and advocates. The ripple effect of healing had touched hundreds of lives. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announced as the ballroom fell silent, please welcome this year's Philanthropist of the Year, Mrs. Simone Whitmore Davis. Simone walked to the podium as 500 guests rose in thunderous applause. From her position on the dais, she could see faces that had become dear to her over the past 2 years. Colleagues, friends, women whose lives had been transformed through the center's programs. Near the back of the room, barely visible in the shadows by the exit, she spotted a familiar figure. Derrick stood alone, having slipped in after the doors closed, his face showing the weight of the past 2 years. His law practice had suffered after word spread about his treatment of his wife and daughter. Candace had left him within months, moving on to another man with better prospects. But Simone felt no anger when she saw him, only a profound sense of gratitude that his cruelty had ultimately led her to discover her true worth. Thank you, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. 2.5 years ago, I was a woman who had forgotten her own value. I allowed someone else's opinion of my worth to become my truth. I believed I was too fat, too stupid, too worthless to deserve love and respect. A hush fell over the room. This wasn't the typical philanthropy speech Atlanta society was accustomed to hearing. I gained weight not because I was lazy or lacking willpower, but because I was carrying emotional burdens that weren't mine to bear. I accepted treatment that no human being should accept because I forgot that my worth isn't determined by anyone else's approval. Simone's voice grew stronger as she spoke. But the most important thing I learned is this: our lowest moments don't define us. What defines us is how we rise from those moments, how we use our pain to fuel our purpose, and how we ensure that others don't have to suffer alone the way we did. The applause began softly and built to a crescendo. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her granddaughter own her truth so completely. The Second Chances Family Center exists because I believe every woman deserves to remember her own magnificence. Every child deserves to see their mother treated with dignity and respect. Every family deserves the chance to heal and grow together. But tonight isn't just about celebrating our work together, Simone continued, her eyes finding David in the audience. Tonight is also about celebrating the kind of love that builds us up rather than tearing us down. Dr. David Thompson, would you join me up here? David rose from his seat with a smile that could have powered the city, making his way to the podium as guests murmured with curiosity. David, Simone said, taking his hand as he joined her, you've shown me what it means to be loved for exactly who I am. You've celebrated my strength, supported my dreams, and loved Tiana as if she were your own daughter. Simone, David said, dropping to one knee as gasps echoed through the ballroom, you've shown me what real strength looks like. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve nothing less than extraordinary love? The diamond ring he pulled from his pocket caught the light like captured starlight. Simone's yes was drowned out by the cheers of 500 guests who had witnessed not just a proposal, but a declaration that love, real love, celebrates and elevates rather than diminishes. As they kissed beneath the ballroom's crystal chandelier, Derrick slipped quietly out the exit. He'd seen enough to understand what he'd lost. Not just wealth or social position, but a woman of incredible worth who deserved far better than he'd ever given her. Later that evening, after the last guest had gone home and the last photo had been taken, Simone sat with her family on Eleanor's back porch. Eleanor, Ruth, Tiana, and David, all the people who'd helped her remember who she truly was. I have an announcement, Tiana said with the dramatic flair of an 11-year-old. I've decided what I want to be when I grow up. Oh? Simone asked, pulling her daughter close. I want to help families like you do, Mama. But I also want to be a judge so I can make sure kids get to stay with parents who love them and take care of them properly. Eleanor clapped her hands with delight. A judge. How wonderful. We'll make sure you get the best education possible. And I want to use both my last names too, Tiana continued. Tiana Whitmore Davis Thompson. That way everyone will know exactly who I am and where I come from. David laughed, ruffling Tiana's curls. That's quite a long name for a little girl. I'm not little anymore, Tiana said with dignity. And Mama says our names tell our story. I want my name to tell the whole story, all the people who loved me and helped me become who I'm supposed to be. As the evening wound down and they prepared to head home, Simone took one last look at the reflection in Eleanor's French doors. The woman looking back at her was radiant, confident, surrounded by love, and completely comfortable in her own skin. She thought about the broken woman who'd listened to Derrick's cruel words in that kitchen 2.5 years ago, who'd believed she was worthless and disgusting. That woman deserved compassion, not judgment. That woman had been carrying wounds that weren't her fault and accepting treatment that said nothing about her worth and everything about the person delivering it. Thank you, she whispered to that earlier version of herself. Thank you for surviving long enough to become who we were always meant to be. The next morning, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Society page would feature photos of the gala, the proposal, and Simone's triumph. The headline would read, From Ashes to Dynasty, the Rise of Atlanta's Most Inspiring Philanthropist. But the real triumph wasn't in the newspaper headlines or the social media coverage. The real triumph was in the message Simone would share with the next woman who walked into the Second Chances Family Center convinced she was worthless. Your worth isn't determined by what others say about you. It's determined by who you choose to be in the face of adversity. And honey, you were born to be magnificent. That night, as Simone tucked Tiana into bed in their beautiful home, her daughter looked up with serious eyes. Mama, are you happy now? Simone thought about the question carefully. I'm not just happy, baby girl. I'm whole. And that's something no one can ever take away from us again. Good, Tiana said sleepily. Because you deserve to be whole. You always did. As Simone turned off the lights and headed to her own room, She smiled at the truth her 11-year-old daughter understood so clearly. She had always deserved to be whole. She had always deserved love, respect, and dignity. She had always been enough.